All right, welcome to tonight's Tanya class. As you all know, we are studying Tanya. We're in the section called Igeret Hakodesh, and we are holding Chapter 13, Perik Gimel of Tanya Igeret Hakodesh. So, as you know, since Tanya is the Bible of mysticism, so every single chapter lays down important foundations of mysticism, and really every chapter, even though it's part of the whole book, it's really independent, but it's connected to obviously the whole idea of mysticism, and specifically each chapter has something revolutionary and novel that this chapter lays the ground for. And in this chapter, the Alter Rebbe lays down something so beautiful, and that is, we all would love to have God's blessings and God's kindness. In the term of Kabbalah, it's called Chesed. Chesed is kindness, where it's the flow of energy. So we all want to have Chesed of Hashem. Who wouldn't want to have Chesed of Hashem? Right? We all want Chesed of Hashem. Now, here the Alter Rebbe shows us how we can all have the Chesed of Hashem. Chesed, kindness of Hashem, of God. We can all achieve that. How do we achieve that? So the Alter Rebbe begins and he brings down a verse from Psalms. Where King David, in this beautiful chapter, speaks about when he was hiding from King Saul that wanted to kill him. He was hiding, and the people where he was hiding told Saul he was hiding. They had to run away. But nevertheless, even though these people tried to hurt him, they squealed, they snitched on him to Saul, and his life was in danger, but nevertheless, he still prayed for them. And he still wanted to see them successful. I mean, that's a real hero. That's real chesed. But in that chapter, King David says as follows: Ma rav tuvcha, how great is your kindness, referring to the kindness of Hashem, asher tzafanta liראיך, that you've hidden for the people that are in awe of you, that have yiras Hashem, be in awe of God. פעלת לחוסים, you've put in place a people that have trust in you. Neged bnei adam, in face of all human beings, even though all people might necessarily behave the proper way, but he still prayed that for the people that trust in Hashem. Now there's many different ways to look at a verse. As we all know, in the Torah there's pshat, there's the simple meaning. There's remez, there's the different codes and different ideas, Drush, Hamaletic, and so there's the Kabbalistic insight to every single verse. So every single verse, there's four ways to look at it, and in there's many levels. But the simple verse says that King David is praying to Hashem to give the great kindness, and he says for two types of people. One type of people is tzafanta. Tzafanta means that they're hidden. That means they serve God in secrecy. And then it says in the same verse, neged bnei adam, in a revealed way. Neged bnei adam means everyone sees. So are we talking about secrets, or are we talking about hidden? What type of people are we talking about? They serve God secretly, or they serve God in a revealed way? And as you can say, okay, God, bless everybody with great, wonderful stuff. The people that serve you hiddenly, openly, I mean, which one are you blessing? So the Alter Rebbe explains as follows. And here the Alter Rebbe takes us into a beautiful journey into who we are. And not only who we are, but we all know we all have an neshama. We have a soul, and the soul has a shoirish in its root. And the Alter Rebbe says like this, that in life, now there's many types of people, but for this conversation, the Alter Rebbe says there's two types of people. Two types of people, what does that mean? In the way they serve God. What does that mean? And we're going to generalize to two types. And again, there's obviously multiple layers and levels, etc. But for this class, and this chapter in Tanya is almost teaching us the two types of people, the way they serve God. One type of person serves God in the, so to speak, track or highway of chesed, and the other one serves God in the highway of Gevura. I'll explain in a minute what chesed is and what Gevura is, but first, the chesed highway and the Gevura highway. Now, why does somebody, before we get into what chesed and Gevura is, but why does somebody serve God based on chesed and the other person serve God based on Gevura? Is, the Alter Rebbe says, based on the source of that person's soul on high. That means like this: if the person's soul is sourced on high in the right side, Yamin, the right of God, they're going to serve God with Chesed, and in a minute we're going to explain what Chesed means practically. Versus if your soul is sourced on high in the left side of God, you will serve God in a way of Gevura. Okay, so now we already have two terminologies that we have to explain. One is Chesed, serving God out of Chesed, and then serving God out of Gevura, the right of God, the left of God. Two powerful things which we're going to discuss. This is obviously a heavy Kabbalistic chapter. And the Alter Rebbe explains us this. Let's start, only because the Alter Rebbe does it this way, we're going to start with the left versus the right. Somebody that serves God with Gevura, and again, the reason is because it's not about this person's Chesed, this person's Gevura. Really, what the Alter Rebbe is saying is, you behave based on your soul, and based on your soul, if it's right-oriented, you're going to behave a certain way, and if it's left-oriented, you're going to behave a different way. So if you see, for example, a person serving God with Chesed, what does that mean? He's a kind person? Yes, on a certain level he's kind. But really what the Alter was saying is that the shoirish, this person's soul, where it comes from is from right, and therefore he's serving God in Chesed. Same thing also, if you see someone serving God with Gevura, is he behaving in Gevura? Sure. Discipline, and which we're going to go into in a minute, but what's the reason? Because go back to this person's soul, and if you're able to take a magnifying glass, see where it's coming from left-oriented in God. Okay. Now, does that mean that a person can switch from right to left? A person, let's say, is a Chesed personality, you cannot switch over to Gevura. Or if a person is a Gevura personality, you cannot switch over to Chesed. And that we're going, stay tuned as we say, that we're going to learn in this chapter. And this is a very, very important chapter, because you see a lot of times someone says, well, what do you want? This is my nature. Okay, could you change your nature? Wait, and we'll find out. Could you change your nature? Okay, so let's first talk about someone that serves God left-oriented, which in simple Kabbalah it's called Gevura. What does Gevura mean? So the Alter Rebbe says you find two attributes when someone's left-oriented. Number one is, he's going to do things I'm going to say the word in Kabbalistic terms, Hebrew, and I'll translate, in a Tzimzum manner. Anybody that's left-oriented is going to do something in a Tzimzum manner. What does Tzimzum mean? Contraction. What does contraction mean? He's going to do everything the minimum. The minimum. If he or she can get away with the minimum, they're going to do it. Notice if someone that's left-oriented, let's say they have to give charity. How much are they going to give? Whatever the minimum requirement is. And whatever they can get away with. That's what they're going to do. Is it bad or good? There's no judgments here. It's the fact. If someone is basically, watch people. If they're just looking to get away with the minimum requirement, guess what? Not their fault. They're Gevura. Why? Because that's where the soul is from. We'll soon talk about could they change it if they want to, and so on and so forth. But the natural tendency of someone that's a left-oriented person is, they are going to do things in a way of Tzimzum. What does Tzimzum mean? Again, they're going to get away with the minimum. It's not bad or good, it's just a fact of life. So it works both ways. If someone's Gevura-oriented, they're going to get away with the minimum. If you see someone trying to get away with the minimum, they're Gevura-oriented. 1 + 1 is 2. And it goes both ways. Okay, that is point number one. Number two, another interesting thing about a left-oriented, a Gevura-oriented person is, they are going to do things in a concealed way. For example, they give charity, they're going to do it, no one knows. No one knows. They're not looking for plaques on buildings. They're not looking for anyone to know they gave the donation, anonymous. So generally speaking, when someone says I gave anonymous, or I'm going to give anonymous, or someone you announce anonymous, one thing you know about the person is that what? Which side is he from, right or left? Left. Not bad. Again, there's no judgments. There are no judgments. It's just a fact. So if someone says anonymous, whatever it is. Okay. Now, I gave you an example of charity, but there's other things. There's all the mitzvot. There's 613 commandments. So if you yourself, or not that you should judge other people, but if people do things, the minimum requirement of the commandments, it could be anything. For example, building a sukkah. You can build a sukkah just for you and your spouse and your immediate family, or you can build a nice big sukkah, right? So if you're going to get away with the minimum requirements, It's coming from Gevura. Or for example, the law is you need to have 3 walls and a bit. Now, obviously, you need really 4 walls. Could you get away with three walls and a bit? Yeah. Now, is that coming from right or left? If you want to do the minimum, hello, you have the answer. Take, for example, buying a pair of tefillin. So you can buy a nice, expensive, beautiful pair of tefillin. That's right. But if you walk in the store and say, listen, what's the cheapest pair of tefillin? Guess what? Again, no judgment. It's coming from Gevura. Why is that? Because the soul is coming from the left side. We're not blaming, we're not judging, it's just a fact. You want to buy a mezuzah, and the person says, okay, what do you want? The cheapest one. Just give me a simple kosher mezuzah. What does that mean? Left-oriented. It comes to studying Torah. Okay, let's sit and study Torah. Nah, I already did my obligation today. Is that right or left? Left. So again, whether it's Torah, whether it's mitzvot, or prayer. I did my prayers for today. But meditate a little in prayer, spend time thinking about God. No, I did my job. Where is that coming from? It's coming from left-oriented, it's coming from Gevura, and that's because the soul on high is coming from on the left side. So that is basically one personality type. Personality type, again, Gevura comes from left-oriented. They will do things to the minimum, prayer, Torah study, mitzvot, and in everything in life. If you're a friend of theirs, even socially, emotionally, they will just be available the minimum, a minimum. So anyone does the minimum, and again, we're not judging, it's just because they're left-oriented. Okay, and obviously, as we mentioned, one is minimum, and second thing is in a concealed way. Let's go to the fun side. One is someone's right-oriented. It means his soul comes from right. Therefore, when he comes down to this world, it's all about chesed. So what does that mean, chesed, practically? Chesed is expansion. What does it mean, expansion? Prayer, right? Prayer, Torah study, mitzvot. They're going to want to do it as much as possible, as great as possible. They want to get a pair of tefillin. Hey, give me the most expensive pair, the nicest pair of tefillin, the sukkah. Give me the biggest sukkah, the best sukkah. Shabbat. They're going to want to have Shabbat to be beautiful and plentiful. Inviting guests to your home. They're going to want to have as many guests as possible. Any mitzvah. Prayer. They'll spend as much time as they can praying and try to meditate on the greatness of God and try to really, really plug in from a beautiful place of expansion and plentiful. And the whole attitude, in attitude, it's all about plentiful. Whether it's prayer, whether it's Torah study, whether it's mitzvot, there's no such thing as looking at the clock, and there's no such thing as a limit. As much as possible, hineni, I'm ready to do. Where does that come from? That's a right-oriented person, chesed, which comes from the right part of God. Now, that's an attitude. Not only in the attitude, but in the actual service. Whether it's chesed, whether it's charity, whether it's any of one of the 613 mitzvot, whether it's Torah study, whether it's prayer, guess what? Is there a limit to how many mitzvot and how many hours they're going to study Torah, or how much they're going to pray? If you're chesed-oriented, guess what? Whew. There is no limit. There's no limit. There is no limit. And guess what? Are you going to do your mitzvot? Are you going to pray? Are you going to study in public? Absolutely. It's all from chesed. So here you have I think I painted a nice 3D picture, right, of the right side and the left side, where the soul comes from, chesed and Gevura. Where chesed, basically, there's no limits. It's in public, with joy, with happiness, with pleasure. And the left side is, I think I did my requirement. Right? So both in attitude, both in the mode of service, secrecy, two different worlds. Two different worlds. Now, so here comes a phenomenal idea. So based on this, guess what? Someone says, listen, this is who I am. Case is closed, right? Someone says, I'm a chesed. Life is great. But maybe there's times where you need to cut back on certain things. Or if someone is very, very disciplined and everything is accounted for, etc., maybe you go try to jump out of the box. No, this is who I am, right? Seemingly, hey, that's where I'm from. Can I change it? And here comes the Alter Rebbe, and he introduces something so beautiful, and he says like this. There's a concept in Kabbalah called Hiskalalut Hamidot. What does Hiskalalut Hamidot mean? That means, even though a midah, for example, chesed is a midah, it's a track. Gevura is a midah, it's a track. Kabbalah says it's something which is called hiskalut hamidot, where every single midah is interconnected. There's no such thing as chesed runs on its own track and Gevura runs on its own track and there is no connection. Meaning to say is, you're a human being. So yes, granted that your soul is from the right side, and therefore you're naturally chesed, or your soul's from the left side, you're naturally Gevura, but guess what? That is nice and good, but because of his skalut hamidot, every person has to have, and does have chesed and Gevura. Everyone has both. Now what does that mean? We just said if you're right-oriented, it's all about chesed, and if you're left-oriented, it's all about Gevura. So what do you mean, hiskalut hamidot? And the Alter Rebbe comes along and he says like this. There's a concept in Kabbalah we call Gilui and Helem. Gilui means revealed, and Helem means concealed. What does that mean? That means like this. If you are right-oriented, and therefore your behavior is chesed, expansion, no limits, or the opposite, if you're left-oriented and you're Gevura and everything is counted for and everything's accounted, everything you secretly, that is called your Gilui behavior. That is your revealed behavior. That's, so to speak, the clause that you show to the world. That's the way you interact with the world. However, on the concealed level, on the Helem level, you have the opposite midah. It means everybody has both. Nobody has one wire. Everybody's wired with both wires. Everybody has the chesed and the Gevura wire. What does that mean? Let's take, for example, as we started before with Gevura. Let's say somebody in the revealed sense of the word, they are a Gevura person. Everything is accounted for, I did my job, and so on and so forth. That's the revealed wire. But guess what? You have a concealed wire that is called chesed. You have a concealed wire of chesed. And because you have a concealed wire of chesed, if you tap into that wire, what kind of chesed could you produce? Infinite chesed. This person that the revealed wire is Gevura, it means everything is limited and everything is concealed. Could they break out of their shell and bring out that concealed wire, tap into the concealed wire? Absolutely, it's their wire. So this idea that you're left-oriented, the Alter Rebbe says is correct but not correct. It's left-oriented because your revealed wire is connected to that. But we all have a concealed wire which is wired into the opposite force of right, and therefore if you're able and willing to tap into that concealed wire, you can perform chesed without limits. The same person that everything is, give me the cheapest one, right? I did my time, you can say to them, come on, open up your heart. Reach in within your soul. What are you really saying? Tap into that concealed wire that you have, it's yours, that is plugged in 100%, not a borrowed plug-in, a real plug-in to the right. You can not change. It's not about changing. You can bring out that concealed wire and all of a sudden do chesed without a limit, pray without limits, study without limits, and guess what? You're not schizo. You don't need to see a therapist. There's nothing wrong with you. All you did was you pulled out the concealed wire. And it's really interesting because you can watch people that have a certain pattern, everything is calculated, everything, they're not willing to jump over anything, and all of a sudden they get inspired. They say, where did that come from? And the answer didn't come from anywhere. They had it within them. It's their concealed wire that they kept concealed. But now they're tapping into it, and now they can live an infinite life of Torah, mitzvot, prayer, etc. The same thing also, someone, let's say, that's right-oriented, and they're always giving, and they're always doing, etc. Does that mean that they cannot tap into their concealed wire, which is connected to Gevura, and be more organized, be more disciplined, and be more regulated, be more calculated where appropriate? Sure. And it's not like they have to change anything. And that's the Chiddush. That's the major evolutionary idea the Alter was saying here, that if you're a certain personality, it's not like you have to change your personality. Keep your personality. Just tap into another talent that you have. And the Alter brings the famous example. We know that in the Mishnah, there's two rabbis, two leading rabbis. I'll say the names, you all know them: Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai, all throughout the Mishnah, they're known. They're always strict. They're always strict. If there's a lenient position, a strict position, 9 out of 10, or 9.9 out of 10, who's taking the strict position? Beis Shammai. If, on the other hand, there's another rabbi called Beis Hillel, they were always chesed, always lenient. If there was an opportunity to be lenient and to be strict, who's taking the lenient position? Beis Hillel. So anywhere in the Mishnah, any argument, look at any argument. There's always, in any argument, there's a lenient and a stringent position. Always, that's the definition of an argument. Beis Shammai will always take the strict position, Beis Hillel will always take the lenient position. Always, as a rule. However, even though I just said always, there is exceptions to the rule. Where Beis Shammai, who's always strict, will take a lenient position, and Beis Hillel, who's always lenient, is going to take a strict position. And the question is, whoa, where did that come from? And what's the answer the Alter Rebbe tells us? Yes, because in a revealed way, Beis Shammai is left-oriented, and he comes from his soul, comes from a left place, and that's why he's stringent. But in the concealed wiring, he also has chesed. And he has a huge amount of chesed. And therefore Beis Shammai could be lenient also, if he's willing to tap into it. And at times he does. Beis Hillel, on the other hand, his revealed attribute is what? Chesed. Because it's sourced where? In the right oriented of God. But guess what? There's times he taps into his inner wire, and his concealed wire tells him Gevura. And that's the dominant force, and all of a sudden he's strict. So that's the idea of what? Hiskalalu tamidot. Every single person has it. Every person has it. Take, for example, the Alter brings a beautiful example, another strong example, we find in the Bible. Who was the first Jew? Abraham. Abraham was known as a Ish HaChesed. He would sit there and bring strangers into his house. He would feed them, he would clothe them. It was all about giving. All about giving. Up to the point when God came to visit him. So you would think he'd be selfish for a few minutes. Okay, no guests, right? Don't bother me, I'm talking to God. No, he saw from the corner of his eye some guests outside. He told God, hold on God, I love you, and I love talking to you, and it's really, really great, a big honor. But guess what? We got to take care of the guest. Chesed is knocking, right? Chesed, Abraham was known as a Isha Chesed, through and through. So, and the reason is because he came from the right, and therefore he's Chesed. But let me ask you a question like this. Abraham, God tested him, and he told him to bring up his son as a sacrifice. Now, you think Chesed, kindness, love, could go ahead and slaughter somebody? Your own son? No! How do you think he did it? Obviously, Gevura. Where did Abraham have Gevura from? There was not any energy of Gevura in Abraham's life. And the answer is what the Alter Rebbe say. You see that he did have Gevura. And it's not like he had to borrow it. It's not like he had to transform himself. He tapped in to the concealed power of Gevura, which he had, which comes from the left place, which is sitting within Abraham, just like every one of us have both. And what's interesting is, when Abraham did that, you know what God told him? And very powerful message God told him. Now I know that you're really God-fearing. Because until now, I didn't know you God-fearing. Why? You're a nice guy. You're right-oriented. You're doing chesed. You're helping people. You're nice to people. You're kind to people. There's no limits. That's who you are. That's your revealed midah. Because it's coming from the right. Okay. What's the wonder that you're being so nice? However, to dig deep into your concealed midah of Gevura and pull it out and perform yira and to perform Gevura and do that only because I commanded you, it's not your nature. You have it, but it's not your nature. Your nature is to be kind. Now I know you're God-fearing because you're willing to pull out a concealed attribute to be able to do great things. Now, so the point is, what do we see from here? That ultimately, everybody serves God on both levels. Just like Abraham, everybody serves God on both levels. Even Yitzchok, the second of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Yitzchok. Yitzchok is known, he served God, what, with Gevura? He was left-oriented. Now, but the fact is that even though Yitzchok was Gevura, in his outwardly service was Gevura, but there were times that Yitzchok was also Chesed. when he dug deep within in his personality. Now, so in other words, let's to paint this picture clear. According to the Alter Rebbe, even though everybody has a slant, a revealed slant, whether it's Chesed, Gevura, and that will affect the way they serve God and the way they relate to people and the way they live their lives, which is all the way the neshama is. But again, the Alter Rebbe says every single person, everyone, has hiskalu tamidot. We have the opposite wire. We have the opposite midah. If you're Chesed, you have Gevura. If you're Gevura, you have Chesed, which is also sourced back to the right or the left of God, and we can pull it out if and when we want to, just like Abraham pulled out the Gevura when God commanded him. Now, so therefore, is there an excuse to say, that's not my style? There's no such thing as not your style. Everything's your style. The question is, your revealed style, your concealed style. Now, when do you pull what out? It's very simple. Just like Abraham. He pulled out what he needed based on what God wanted from him. So now King David, and it's interesting, is according to Kabbalah, it says King David is from the side of Gevura. King David is the side of Gevura. So King David comes to God, and King David tells God like this. Marav Tuvcha, and this is the way the Alter Rebbe interprets the verse from King David. He says to God, how great is your kindness? What does that mean? We want you, God, to give us and bless us with not just regular kindness, great kindness. But the question is, why should God give us great kindness? Why? So King David says, and this is very powerful because we know that the way you behave, that's the energy you cause from above. So for example, if you think life is great, you know what happens? You know what God gives you? God gives you a great life. If you think life is terrible, guess what? Okay, God will give you a terrible life. Life is a mirror. It's whatever you believe it is, that's what happens. Interesting, I heard a story about a person that came to a tzaddik. He was having troubles, difficulties. And up to the point where they actually said that he was going to go blind. And he came begging for the tzaddik that the tzaddik should pray to God on his behalf. So the tzaddik said, the righteous man said, I'll pray on your behalf. Let me do my part. But I have something for you to do. He says, okay, well, tell me, I'm ready to do anything. And he said, I want you to start and being grateful for God for all the wonderful things that you have. Be grateful for everything. You still have eyesight. And sure enough, he followed the tzaddik's advice, and he started to be grateful for everything that God gave him. The righteous man, the tzaddik, the saint, prayed for him. He was grateful, and grateful for everything he gave. The tzaddik came back, don't worry, you'll be fine. You'll be able to see. Sure enough, a while later, he went back to the hospital to check his eyes, where they told he was going to go blind. They said, guess what? You're totally fine. You're good to go. What does that mean? What does that mean? Very simple. When you're grateful for all the great things God gives you, you know what God gives you in life? Gratefulness. He gives you great life. But unfortunately, if you're, I don't want to say the opposite, guess what? That's what you're going to have. So comes along King David and he says to God, look at the Jewish people. The Jewish people are full of chesed. What kind of chesed? Infinite chesed. And he says very simple. Take somebody that's Gevura, and from the side of Gevura, because he comes from left-oriented. King David said he's a victim. He says, no. But his inner strength is what? Is chesed. And the proof is, take someone that's really always disciplined and organized, and he does exactly what he has to, but you come to him and you say, listen, I'm begging you, we need help. I need you to go out of your comfort zone. I need you to do something you're not ready to do. Whether it's someone struggling and listen, we need to help them, whether it's a financial thing, or we want you to study more Torah than you're ready to study, or pray more. Sometimes the rabbi comes, hey, you got to study more Torah and pray more. All of a sudden, all these people that were calculated, all of a sudden are like willing to do anything. They're willing to pray as much as needed, and they're willing to study Torah as much as needed. They're willing to give charity as much as needed, do any mitzvah in it without counting. Why is that? Because inside every person, even this person that's left-oriented, has infinite amount of chesed, because we all have, and that person has the inner wire of chesed, which gets sourced in the right side of God. On the other hand, Someone that's left or someone that's right-oriented, which means he's full of chesed, which chosim actually comes from the word bitachon. He has bitachon of God, which is right-oriented. People that trust in God is right-oriented. Someone that's right-oriented, what kind of chesed is he going to do? Infinite amount of chesed. Infinite amount of chesed. So, bottom line, King David says to God, everybody has and is ready to do infinite and does infinite amount of chesed. If the person's right-oriented, so in a revealed way they do infinite amount of chesed. If the person's left-oriented, push them against the wall, they're going to do infinite, and they do infinite amount of chesed. So therefore King David says to God, because the Jewish people do infinite amount of chesed, so what do you need to do? You need to ma'arav tuvcha, you need to give them tremendous chesed. In the words of Kabbalah, it's called Rav Chesed. What's the idea of Rav Chesed? Because we know, again, just not to get lost in Kabbalistic zone here, but we know there's two levels in the highest levels of the flow of energy from God in the world of Keser. There's called Zer Ampin, which is a small face, little translation, and Arach Ampin, the long face. Not long, God forbid, in a negative way, but long in terms of like a lot of blessings. Rav Chesed comes from Arach Ampin. And what happens is, because Rav Chesed comes from a very, very high level, so what happens is, if God is giving you Chesed from a lower level, so in a lower level, there could be opposition. Let's say God says, you know what, I want to give this person a great life. So the Satan, the Yetzer Hara, the devil can come along. Why giving the person a great life? The person doesn't deserve it. And there's room for argument. And guess what? And it's possible that the flow could stop. Whether it's permanent or temporarily, the flow can stop. But if the chesed is coming from God, from what place? From Rav Chesed, over there, from that level, it's like a super chesed, and nobody can stop it. There's no room for opposition. Not the devil, not the evil inclination, nobody, the klipo, nobody can stop it. So King David says to God, because the Jewish people do what kind of chesed? They do infinite chesed. Again, like either they're doing it from a revealed way of chesed, or if they're doing it from a concealed way of chesed. Either way, it's infinite chesed, because chesed has no limits. That's the definition of chesed. There's no limits, there's no rules. They're willing to do anything at any time. So therefore, King David pleads with God that Rav Chesed, give the Jewish people Rav Chesed. And then if you have Rav Chesed from God, guess what? There's no opposition. And if you have Rav Chesed from God, let me tell you, life is really, really great. Way beyond any of your dreams or any of your expectations. Now, but based on what is King David beseeching God, not based on an empty promise, based on the facts of life, that every one of us either do infinite amount of chesed, or every one of us have the ability to do it and will do it. So therefore, if we want to receive God's infinite blessings, infinite chesed, where there's no opposition, we need to do one thing, and one thing only. Just do chesed, without limits. Whether it's chesed of charity, whether it's chesed of doing mitzvot, whether it's chesed of prayer or Torah, do things without a limit, stop calculating. And again, if we're able to do it from a revealed way, it's wonderful. And if you don't do it in a revealed, you want to do it from either way. And this way, King David can come to God and say, give them Rav Chesed. And God will give us Rav Chesed. And if you have Rav Chesed from God, guess what? You don't need anything else. You have the greatest and the most powerful blessings that exist, all because we do our part, and King David's our fighter to God, that God should give us Rav Chesed. We'll all have Rav Chesed, great, beautiful, infinite blessings.